When Kudakwashe Tagwireyi convened a Zanu-PF gathering in Chitungwiza, drawing youths and popular musicians, the optics were unmistakable. A powerful financier, long linked to President Emmerson Mnangagwa's circle, stepping more fully into the party's political theater. In a party where symbolism carries strategic weight, the event looked like an overture to deepen Tagwireyi's formal role and to energize the party's grassroots around the ED 2030 conversation to keep Mnangagwa in office past 2028. Youth structures and pro-party outlets have, in recent months, framed Tagwireyi's presence as an economic boon, casting him as an empowerment catalyst, whose business resources and networks can be mobilized for organizational strength and youth programs. A narrative amplified by praise from Zanu-PF's Harare Youth Wing around his co-option bid into the Central Committee. Yet this same advance sharpened internal resistance, particularly among figures aligned with Vice President Constantino Chiwenga and war veterans who have bristled at the ED 2030 push and at the perception of moneyed influence shaping the party's succession lanes. The shockwaves that followed were not only about the Chitungwiza optics, but also about the subsequent Central Committee episode. Multiple outlets reported that Chiwenga ordered Tagwireyi out of a Central Committee meeting in Harare on procedural grounds, arguing that Tagwireyi's attendance preceded formal ratification of his co-option. Journalists at the venue noted that Tagwireyi's seat remained empty and that his convoy left after the meeting began. Party spokespeople later denied any dramatic ejection, claiming only that co-options were not ratified at that sitting and would be addressed later. Parallel coverage described the clash as symptomatic of deepening succession tensions, with some sources presenting the ejection as part of a broader effort by Chiwenga to reassert party procedure and curb Tagwireyi's rising influence inside the leadership structures. One reason the Chitungwiza event resonated is that it fit a wider messaging arc. Zanu-PF youth figures have welcomed Tagwireyi's ascent as an economic relief for the party and the nation, describing a synergy between his business clout and the party's development programs. In their telling, Tagwireyi's presence helps underwrite mobilization and empowerment projects, especially in urban areas where Zanu-PF seeks to regain ground. That line was reiterated around Provincial Coordinating Committee discussions in Harare, tying his involvement to bolster youth-targeted initiatives and recruitment drives. But critics inside and outside the party see this financial muscle as double-edged. It risks consolidating factional power through patronage and blurring lines between private wealth and public politics, particularly amid accusations that donations and logistics are being leveraged to engineer structural outcomes, including the controversial co-option, and more broadly, the climate around the ED 2030 debate. The ED 2030 idea, extending Mnangagwa's term by 2 years, moved from murmurs to formal party resolutions at Zanu-PF's National People's Conferences in 2024 to 2025. Culminating in Mutare this October, where delegates instructed government to begin constitutional steps for an extension. Government Legal Secretary and Justice Minister Ziambi trumpeted the resolution in terms of continuity and Vision 2030, while opposition figures and civil society denounced the project as unconstitutional and predatory in spirit. International and regional media coverage has emphasized both the legal hurdles, including arguments that such a change would require a referendum, and the political realities of Zanu-PF's parliamentary strength, raising the question of whether the party seeks to amend the length of terms, as opposed to the number, to avoid certain constitutional constraints. At the heart of the legal fight is Section 328 of the Constitution, which many scholars say requires a referendum for changes affecting presidential term limits or the architecture of executive power. Critics warn that attempts to recalibrate Section 95(2)(b term length without touching Section 91(2) two-term cap would be an end run around the Constitution's spirit. Others argue such a maneuver could still be staged with a 2/3 parliamentary vote. Recent litigation filed at the Constitutional Court by civil activists aims to stop the extension, though skeptics suspect a friendly challenge designed to be dismissed in a way that legitimizes the ED 2030 path, an allegation reminiscent of previous strategic court cases in Zimbabwean politics. The tension between textual legality and political choreography is precisely why a high-profile financier's visible political role becomes combustive. It feeds the narrative that legal engineering is being greased by elite patronage rather than democratic consent. Chiwenga has sought to occupy the rhetorical high ground by casting his pushback as defense of party discipline and resistance to selling Zanu-PF to wealthy bidders. Reports indicate he convened Harare's provincial leadership to return vehicles allegedly donated by Tagwireyi and reversed disciplinary actions against youth aligned to him, signaling an effort to retake structures and slow perceived capture via gifts and logistics. He is said to have stressed that the liberation movement's legacy cannot be subordinated to transactional politics or personal enrichment. This posture resonates with strands of the war veterans community and traditionalists, who are wary of a personality-centric extension and who prefer a timetable that would keep the succession window open in 2028, rather than deferring it to 2030 under Mnangagwa's continued watch. Further escalating matters, a leaked 7-page dossier attributed to Chiwenga and presented to the Politburo alleged that Tagwireyi siphoned over $1.9 billion and improperly absorbed state assets into his private empire. It also alleged that other businessmen allied to the ED 2030 current benefited from inflated contracts or schemes. The document purportedly frames these financial networks as underwriting the 2030 push inside party and state structures. While the claims are contested and politically charged, the leak intensified scrutiny of how business political alliances shape internal power plays and public policy. It also bolstered Chiwenga's effort to position himself as the defender of constitutionalism and anti-corruption, even as observers note that anti-corruption frames have often doubled as weapons in factional battles since 2017. The Chitungwiza showpiece, with youths and entertainers, was not incidental. Zimbabwe's median age is low, and cultural influences remain potent mobilizers in high-density areas. Aligning musicians and youth leaders with an economic empowerment message is an old but effective play in Zanu-PF's repertoire, especially where urban legitimacy has been contested. That party youth leaders publicly celebrated Tagwireyi's co-option and capacity to resource programs underscores this tactic's contemporary iteration. To frame the financier not as a shadow operator, but as a visible benefactor of empowerment pipelines and a patron of aspirational cultural spaces. Conversely, the backlash from rival camps points to the risks of over-personalizing developmental narratives. If empowerment is tied to one man's largesse, the line between party building and patrimonialism blurs, inviting exactly the accusations of capture and coercion that Chiwenga has been making in forums and reported meetings with provincial executives. On paper, the dispute over Tagwireyi's presence at the Central Committee centered on procedure. Co-option must be ratified first. But in context, procedure is politics by other means. If one faction can accelerate co-options and seat allies quickly, it shifts internal voting arithmetic in ways that affect everything from disciplinary cases to conference resolutions. That is why the alleged ejection, denied by party spokespersons but corroborated in on-the-ground reportage about an empty chair and a departing convoy, became a national news flashpoint. Even those denying the ejection conceded that ratification had not occurred, which buttressed Chiwenga's narrower claim. Whatever the political winds, the meeting could not confer de facto status before due process. It is a tidy wedge issue. Defend the Constitution internally, then apply the same frame to the national Constitution on ED 2030. Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe.